Welcome to Motocross Action's test video on the 2021 KTM 450XCF. Over the past few years, we've been dabbling more and more into the cross-country scene, and we've been having fun testing the hybrid motocross and off-road XC models. So if you're trying to decide between buying a cross-country or motocross-specific KTM 450, we're here to help you out. This video of the KTM 450XCF was shot when the bike was brand new, but the test was written and recorded after we spent many hours racing this bike off-road at works, SRA Grand Prix, and Sprint Enduro races, as well as motocross races around Southern California. Starting off, let's dive into the 9 aspects that are different between the cross-country specific 450XCF and the motocross 450SXF. Number 1, and the most obvious difference, is the oversized tank that carries 2.25 gallons of fuel compared to the motocross bike's 1.9 gallons. Number 2, instead of the standard 19-inch motocross rear wheel, this bike has an 18-inch rim. Number 3, the WP Exact air forks and shock have a softer, cross-country specific setting and a new lift height component in the forks mid-valve. Number 4, the 450XCF has a cross-country specific mapping in the ECU. Number 5, it comes with KTM's handguards that are pretty trick in how they mount directly onto the front brake and clutch perches to create more room on the handlebars. Number 6, the KTM 450XCF comes with a taller 13:48 gearing ratio instead of the 13:49 that you find on the 450SXF. Number 7, it comes with Dunlop's AT81 tires instead of the MX33s. These tires have an off-road specific tread pattern, softer rubber compound, and better resistance to pinch flats for riders going over sharp rocks. Number 8, it comes with a kickstand. And number 9, the 2021 KTM 450XCF retails for $10,799, which is more expensive than the 2021 450SXF that came in at $10,199 last year. Getting into the suspension, the WP Exact air forks have been a huge story for all of the KTM, Husky, and Gas bikes for the 2021 season. On the outside, the forks look the same, but on the inside, the new Exact air forks have improved oil bypass notches and a new air seal with extra air bypass holes. Both systems were developed to produce pressure spikes and create smoother and more predictable fork action. The forks also got an enlarged crossover bleed slot, which allows air pressure to transfer from the positive to the negative chamber in the air forks easier. Also, they got a new rubber bump stop at the bottom of the forks, and the compression and rebound clickers are both able to be adjusted by hand. The MXA Wrecking Crew is well accustomed to these updates because they also came on the rest of the WP Exact air forks for the other models, but there is one aspect that is different about these forks on the cross-country bikes, and that's that they don't have the trampoline shim at the mid-valve, and instead they have a lift height setting that allows WP to create softer suspension valving without bending shims. Unless you're a die-hard off-road KTM rider, you might not know that prior to 2021, the cross-country and two-stroke models from the Austrian brands didn't have a shim stack at the mid-valve. Instead, the shims were only at the base valve. Previously, WP technicians weren't able to create damping at the mid-valve on these forks because they couldn't get the shims to be soft enough without bending or breaking. Trampoline shims are preloaded, so when oil squeezes through them, the shims bend back into the cavity, and like a trampoline, they sink down under force. The 450XCF float setting is similar. It uses a light spring inside of the cup light cavity to push back up on the shims to close off the valve when it's switching from compression to rebound dampening. This allows the WP technicians to use softer shims and find their favorite off-road setting without worrying about damaging shims by making them too light, too thin, and too flimsy. So this begs the question, were last year's cross-country specific Exact air forks bad? Surprisingly, no. We thought that the forks were actually great last year. However, WP technicians assured us that from now on, the WP Exact air forks on cross-country and two-stroke models will be much better because they won't be creating all the dampening at the base valve, and it'll be a little bit more of a balanced setting like it is on their motocross models. So how does the 450XCF handle? Well, the suspension is much softer than the 450SXF. On rough trails or on tracks without too many jumps, The suspension is super comfortable and plush. The rebound in the shock is also a little bit faster, which helps the rear wheel stick to the ground better over chatter bumps. The stock settings were too soft for our testers on the motocross track, but with clicker adjustments and the correct air pressure for our weight, we were able to make it work pretty well on the track. The suspension is, however, perfect for cross-country Grand Prix racing and desert and woods riding. As for the power, the KTM 450XCF is mellow and not very exciting until you're about halfway down the straightaway, where it really shines. The bike rolls on smoothly through the bottom and mid-range, which makes it easy to ride, and before you know it, you're into the next corner. KTM has been using this tactic of smooth power delivery for a few years now. The 250, 350, and 450 four-strokes really aren't as exciting off the bottom end and into the mid-range as some of the other brands are, but when you factor in the quieter muffler that deceivingly makes you think you're going slower and the wider spread of power, you end up with faster lap times. Extra traction at the rear wheel pays dividends when you're looking at the stopwatch. Overall, the 450XCF's power is tamer than that of the easy-to-ride 450SXF motocross version, but we appreciated it when we're racing at off-road events like the Grand Prix races, the work-style races, because we could ride it harder and longer without getting as tired. One aspect we really like about the 450XCF is the slim, oversized tank. How is KTM able to make an oversized tank so slim, like as slim as their stock one? Well, the answer is found in the geometry of the chromoly steel frame. The steel-framed Austrian bikes have a single top tube, and the fuel tank sits on top of it and folds over both sides. Other aluminum frame bikes have perimeter style frame spars that start down at the foot pegs and meet up at the steering stem. On these bikes, the tank sits between the two frame spars, which fits a stock tank perfectly, but it doesn't really leave any room for an oversized tank. If you want to add extra fuel to a perimeter style frame bike like a Honda, Kawasaki, or Suzuki model, you have to go up and out. This raises the tank and its fuel cap higher and/or increases the width of the tank at the shrouds. If you're a loyal MXA follower, you know that adding weight further away from the center of gravity equals an unbalanced chassis that's more difficult to corner. Yamaha is the only other brand with the ability to add fuel without going up and out. With a backwards engine design, Yamaha can add more fuel capacity by making the tank go further down and further back. Although we love the smooth power and the ultra plush suspension on the 450XCF because it's super easy to ride and inspires great confidence, we do have a few complaints about this bike. For the 450XCF to be a real ready-to-race cross-country model, it needs a skid plate to protect it from rocks and roots and other things you come across in an off-road race. Plus, we hate the push-button gas cap that comes on this bike and really wish that KTM would do something to fix the spokes and the sprocket bolts so that they wouldn't come loose so often. Finally, if we're going to consider this an off-road bike, a wide ratio transmission and a spark arrestor would go a long way. Overall, the 450XCF is a blast to ride and it works well on tracks or trails. We appreciate the plush suspension and the smooth power on the 450XCF. If you're deciding between a 450XCF cross-country bike and a 450SXF motocross bike, think about where you're riding it most. If you're riding on trails more than half of the time, we would definitely recommend the 450XCF. If you're riding motocross most of the time and only a little bit of trails, we think you'll be able to get by just fine with the 450SXF. So that's all for this video on the 450XCF from KTM. Thank you guys for tuning in. The MXA Wrecking Crew, we pride ourselves on picking apart these bikes and really giving you guys as many details as you can, so when you go to the dealer, you're well equipped and know exactly what you want to buy and what you're going to look out for when you have the bike in your garage. Thanks for tuning in. For more information on what we got going on, more bike tests, product tests, latest news going on in the industry, race results, and more, check out motocrossactionmag.com. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well if you're going to be on here, checking us out there and see some of our latest videos by clicking the thumbnails now. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.